So, Wheel of Time has been canceled, and I've seen blame being passed around like nobody's business. It is so interesting that that is the case, though. It's not surprising because I guess fans at this point, we're all just used to being the ones who are the problem when it comes to some of these shows getting canceled, and not the executives and not the storyboarders and story writers and directors and the people who they hire. No, it's our fault. The people who are supposed to be the consumer. We get mad at the things that are the bait and switches, and yet it is also our fault that the things were baiting and switching in the first place. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And so the Wheel of Time is just the latest version of that. And I've seen articles and headlines claim all sorts of different opinions about why it got canceled. I've seen people blame streaming services. I've seen people blame the fans, of course. I've seen people blame the expense of the show, that it was too expensive. But very few people are blaming the story being butchered. Very few people are blaming the way the show has decided to do its own thing rather than tell the story that the people were originally the fans of in the first place. That never seems to get mentioned. And it's not just Wheel of Time. Wheel of Time is just the latest victim. But you think about stuff like Rings of Power. You think about fantasy shows like The Witcher, both of which wanted to really try to capture and fill the hole that was Game of Thrones, which House of the Dragon tried to do that, and they're not even able to do that. Game of Thrones was a moment in time. It'll never be duplicated again. But you could have had something. Wheel of Time is a popular series. The Witcher is a popular brand. These are things that could have completely blown it out of the water. But you chose to do something different. And because you chose to do something different, the fans of that original property that you had, because everything is built in, you have that built-in fan base when you pick up an IP such as these. That's the whole point. That's the reason why these streaming services picked up these IPs, because it came with the built-in fan base that immediately brought eyes, that immediately brought viewership. And then they hope that that built-in fan base can now turn around and convince their friends, their family, that, hey, I've read this thing. I'm an authority on this thing. This is something that's important in my life. You should watch it too. And they're not wrong, except when they then change the story to be something crazy. Or when they then change the story to be something that was never the original type of story in the first place. When the writers decide they want to put their own mark on it. Then it's like, well, this isn't what I actually meant to recommend to you. This isn't the story at all. But then when they leave, when the viewership drops, all of a sudden it's their fault? That doesn't make any sense. And yet that is the type of headline that is running rampant around Wheel of Time's cancellation. It's not our fault as fans. You're butchering the story. You're not making things look good. And the funny thing is, there's been a lot of, speaking of Rings of Power and speaking of The Witcher, there's been a lot of comparisons because The Witcher is pretty much going away, right? Like it'll have this season coming out, and maybe they'll get that next season, season 5, I believe. Maybe they'll get that next season because maybe they had a deal with Netflix, or maybe Netflix will just drop it, full stop. I think the first episode will be fairly interesting because people just want to see what it looks like. But yeah, it's going to be dropped, full stop, right? I mean, the show was focused way more on Yennefer and Ciri and not necessarily as much on Geralt, which has been proven by the fact that Geralt's barely even in the series when you start doing like running times. What would also be a little bit ironic is if Liam Hemsworth's Geralt got way more time than Henry Cavill's Geralt, but that's neither here nor there. That's gonna go away. Rings of Power, I think a lot of us are wondering how that's even managed to stay afloat, but I think that's because of Amazon and Jeff Bezos' commitment to it. They got to make sure this is a thing because they bragged so crazily about it being the most expensive show of all time. Probably not the best thing to do. So when you think about stuff like that, I think to myself, well, those are two other big fantasy series like The Wheel of Time that were supposed to come in and really turn the fantasy genre on its head with some cool things, great actors, cool visuals, all that stuff like that, and fill the hole that was Game of Thrones. And all three of them successfully came in and did their own thing. And that's never talked. I just always find that so interesting that that's never talked about. They will do all these different things, all these different like reasons and propositions and all of that stuff. And they'll never talk about the fact that maybe the reason why the show isn't doing well, maybe the reason why the viewership is down, maybe the reason why viewers aren't handling it well isn't because they are some sort of ist or phobe. Maybe it's because you are expecting them to pay for this service to watch this show that they should automatically like just because they were a fan of the original IP that it came from. And if they don't, they are the problem, and there's something wrong with them. And I don't understand why fans have to carry that burden. I don't get it. It does not make sense to me. You have so much that can become a problem when it comes to these fantasy shows. Chronological deception is one, where these things are just out of order and they don't even make a lot of sense. Plot misdirection, that's another one, where you're like, well, this is what I know, and this is going in a completely different, situation. That was what happened with The Witcher, especially in season 2. I don't know, it's all over the place. And I find it so interesting that the Wheel of Time being canceled and being the latest victim, despite all the stuff that's happened, despite all the things that have happened with all these different shows, still is doing that when it comes to the headlines. It's why I always say, and I've said this numerous times, the media is not the friend of these shows, of these actors, of these directors. They're not your friend, because the media these days has their own ideologies of what they want to be true, what they feel to be true. It's their own sites, it's their own brands. They're allowed to do that. But that doesn't mean that's going to help your brand. Case in point, if The Witcher or Wheel of Time or House of the Dragon come out, you can have 6 different blog sites run by 6 different types of people who have 6 different opinions about what it means to them if they have 6 different ideologies. And now it's good because of this, but it's bad because of that. And now it's great because it represents this thing that I believe in, but it's bad because the people hate this thing that I believe in, even though the show and the plot never had anything to do with this thing that I believe in. And we're still doing that. We haven't learned anything. Or you know what? I should take that back. Perhaps the executives have learned something, and it's these bloggers and these media sites and these headlines that still do not, because they want the clicks, obviously. Maybe, maybe not. I know a lot of people would claim that the executives still haven't learned anything because this has been going on for well over a decade now, and I think a lot of people would say, nah, they haven't learned anything, and they won't. They're not going to. But I just look at the Wheel of Time and go, it didn't have to be this way. And just because they got canceled doesn't mean that fantasy as a whole is dead, doesn't mean we've reached the end, doesn't mean that people aren't interested. It's just that they're not interested in the story that they originally loved being changed to something that looks nothing like it. And at this point, I don't blame fans for being tired. I don't blame fans for deciding it's not for them and then dropping, and that viewership and subsequently dropping with it. I don't blame them. You can't. Because it's high time that these executives and these companies realize you can't take these people for granted. The problem is they probably still will.